Welcome back to the Dial In podcast. We got a very special guest with us here today, Marko Agbaba, and he is the founder of Agbaba Holdings, which is a real estate development company. Very young guy. He's already got a couple awesome projects under his belt, and we're excited to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
So, Marko, can you tell us a little about how did you get into real estate development?
Yeah, so I went to university in Waterloo at Laurier, and I saw cranes for the first time because I come from a very small town of about 1,000 people.
Yeah.
So nobody's building anything new. You know what I mean? Maybe like a garage or something like that. So when I saw these cranes building things, I just got completely mesmerized by it. And I was like, love at first sight. So I found a guy that was a developer and I told him, I'll work for free for you, whatever you need me to do, just let me be around you.
Yeah.
And he actually ended up paying me, which was pretty awesome.
Cool.
Help with student loans there. But so that's how I got into the business. And then from there, I kind of just made it an objective that I wanted to become a developer. And, it's a weird career to pick because there's no real path. Like you can't go to school, get a degree in being a real estate developer. And I didn't know at the time that people partner and people have funds and other people bring the money. So in my head, I was like, okay, I need to make a capital pool, enough money to start buying these properties and developing. And I can't develop until I have enough. And that's pretty much how I started. So it took me probably, I think I fell in love with development at 17. I think I built my first project. I could be wrong by a year or so, but like 24, 25. So it took a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's very impressive in what you've done in a short amount of time as well. And I think I want to pull on your point about cranes. We actually met with a developer recently who was a bit of a mentor of mine and was saying, follow the cranes.
Yeah.
When we were talking about expansion and talking about what's the next market we want to hit, he's like, where are the most cranes right now?
Yeah.
And that was sort of the differentiator of going in one city versus another.
Yep.
So you could have stayed at school. You were at Laurier, was it?
Laurier.
What was the decision to come back to Windsor and make that your development?
Well, so that developer that I started working for, he was in student housing.
Okay.
And I really got to understand student housing because I was working in the property management field. So like pretty much boots on the ground, like how the actual business operates.
Yeah.
So I knew I had a competitive advantage in student housing. Now it became the calculation of let's go through every city in Ontario and let's do the numbers. So pretty much you go on, find Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace ads, get an idea of what those rents are for that market.
Yeah.
What is the property cost? Do the math on each city, right? And I came out to Windsor where the mathematics were just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like the cash returns, the dividend yields on these assets. So I'm like, okay. And I also thought that since I wanted to develop, it needed to be a market that I could dominate in. I'm not really coming here to just make some money. I would like to leave a mark, right?
Yeah.
And dominate the market I'm in. So Windsor was pretty much untouched.
Yeah.
Like small infill developments here and there. So I'm like, okay, one, the numbers work. Two, the student population's big enough to support a big increase. So I have a big runway. And I can win, at that market. So especially going in with no partners, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the decision making for going into Windsor.
Yeah. You mentioned the yields. I'm curious, how do you evaluate these opportunities? What's sort of the math that you do? Do you put together pro forma?
Yeah. So I have a finance degree and I invested in stocks before real estate.
Yeah.
So when I came down to do the math for real estate, it is like the easiest math ever. So real estate math is like, I call it napkin finance.
Yeah.
You can do it pen and paper. Honestly, at this point in the game, I don't even really use Excels to evaluate a deal. It's just pen and paper and a calculator, like really simple.
Yeah.
But it's pretty simple. You pretty much look at, okay, what is this house going to cost me?
Yeah.
You got to get an idea of what these expenses are going to be, right? Your utilities, your property taxes, your insurance, et cetera. Find out all your costs. What's your rental income going to be? Subtract those two, right? So now you have your net income. And the most important thing is to divide that number by the equity that you have in the deal. And that's going to give you your cash on cash return. Essentially, if you're buying a stock, similar to a dividend yield. Okay, so that's the money that you're getting in your pocket. So you ignore principal repayment, you ignore appreciation of the asset. That's going to be your total return. But what you're interested in when you're evaluating these kind of like at least student housing is your cash flow ROI. So your dividend yield. And then pretty much based on that, you can make your decision. Now in real estate, there's a lot more than just cash flow, right?
Yeah.
So when you start creating more wealth and things like that, you're going to be looking at, where's the best position to be appreciating, obviously the bigger deal you have, the more principal repayment, things like that. But off the beginning, if you're a beginner investor, like cash flow is really important because it just allows you to weather like all storms,
Yeah. And when you first were looking for financing, were there anyone that guided you, or was there certain financial institutions that you went to for some of these financing for these large projects?
Well, actually, I had met a mortgage broker. So before I left Waterloo, I actually had a pretty good job. So I was running sales for a condo developer called Innate Developments. They do in like Kitchener, Waterloo, Toronto.
Okay.
And I met a mortgage broker
Yeah.
while I was selling him a condo.
Okay.
And it just so happened I met him. I only did him for one deal because it ended up, in hindsight, it's 2020, right? But back it wasn't really that good of a deal on the financing.
Yeah.
But so that's how I got my first one, and I had to convince my mom to co-sign with me.
Okay.
Which was probably the hardest part of my entire real estate journey, was
Yeah.
convincing mom to co-sign on mortgage financing for me. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what I find is so cool about what you're doing as well is you're a developer for student housing, and you're also getting into young families as well, which we'll touch upon. But it's cool that there's a developer who was a student, who lived in student housing, who is also providing student housing.
Yeah.
Right? Oftentimes you see student housing companies are usually older, more established companies who've been around for a long time, but you are the boots in the ground, right?
Well, one step further. So I literally had just finished university, and I moved straight to Windsor, and I had this. It was like an 8-bedroom, two bathroom student residence, like a duplex.
Yeah.
And when I moved to Windsor, I lived with the students.
Yeah.
Because I was like, 24 years old. And we're not
Right.
that big of a difference in age, pretty much the same age. I think one of them was actually older than me.
Yeah.
So I just lived with the students for my first year until I kind of, got things going.
And they knew that you were the developer?
Well, I didn't develop it at the time. I
Okay.
just bought an existing house and
Okay.
we added a kitchen and renovated it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, they knew I was the landlord. They actually got me, when they moved out, they got me a shirt, University of Windsor Dad, because I was
cool.
like taking care of all the repairs and stuff like that the whole time. So
Yeah.
great relationship with them. Good people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what do you find is most attractive for student housing? What are the differentiators versus one quality of student housing versus your quality of student housing?
First of all, number one, there's only one business in the world where location's more important, and that's airport parking. Like, student housing is all about location because students don't have vehicles.
Yeah.
And they're really serious about going to school, especially when you're talking postgraduate students. So the closer you can be to the university is everything.
Yeah.
Like, you could even have a not good product, but if you're on the same street as the university, it will be rented out the second you put up ads. Second thing is going to be bathrooms per student, right? Like, if you can get private bathrooms, that's like as good as you can get. Obviously, you really don't want to break more than like 2 people per bathroom. That would probably be the maximum. And then third thing is, like, especially I find with the female students, like, design is important. So, how modern are the cabinet colors and what color of granite are you using, accent walls, things like that becomes important. But that's definitely behind, like, location is everything, pretty much. Yeah.
You make a great point about location. It's similar to a sales guru kind of mentor that we follow with Alex Hormozy.
Okay.
He talks about the starving crowd, right? You could be selling the worst hot dogs in the world, but if you're outside of a stadium full of a hungry crowd and there's very limited supply but very high demand, I mean, location is everything.
Yeah, if you're like a shawarma kingdom across from a bar, right? You're going to sell shawarmas.
Exactly. So was it hard finding that land that was so close in proximity to the school?
No, because I knew that going into the business.
Yeah.
So I just waited. Like, I'm a very patient investor. During the boom, like the end of the 21, 22 boom, I didn't make a single transaction for like a year and a half. And I was just sitting on capital when everyone else was buying, because I'm a very patient, like, I wait for the perfect swing every time. And for me, the number one thing is location.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to yield on that. Like, I don't even mind paying a 5% premium on a property to be in the right location versus getting an amazing deal on a bad location, right?
Yeah. What does the life look like for a real estate developer in between deals, right?
Look, as you get further along in the journey, I'll tell you the beginning part. The beginning part, you're doing everything, right? Like, there's a lot of times where I slept on floors, and, I always wanted to make sure that my workers, as soon as they came there, I was already there.
Yeah.
When they left, I was already there. So you have that phase. That's probably like first 5 years.
Okay.
Probably like any business, right? Same as what you're doing. Afterwards, I find that you transition to more focusing on improving yourself and your thought process. So for me personally, like, I need to read at least 1 hour a day. So I've got to be studying 1 hour a day, got to take care of the fitness, the energy levels, the sleep and things like that, because your job really becomes making great decisions.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a uncomfortable transition that I think every entrepreneur probably goes into. That's kind of the phase I'm in now.
Yeah.
So in between deals and during deals is not really that different for me.
Yeah.
Most of the time you're just working on yourself, and then obviously putting out all the fires throughout the business. And then making great decisions when it's time to make make great decisions.
Yeah. And that's what attracted me so much about getting you on to the pod is when we first met, I could feel that energy that you brought into the room. And we talk about being dialed in, right? The whole pod is named after dialing in. And it sounds like you spend a lot of time dialing in.
For sure.
Whether that's your fitness, your health, your work. How, was that something you've always had a habit of since you were in university, or is that something that you've developed over time?
That's a good question. I've always had a habit of it, but it grows in level as you get more time because, as you know, as an entrepreneur, like there are certain times in the journey, especially in that first half decade, where you're just working like 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
And like you kind of let yourself slip in a lot of ways because you just don't have time for it. You're focusing on the business. Yeah. It's always been a priority of mine. But now where I've gotten to in my journey, it's like that is the number one priority, right? Yeah. Like, so if I'll even sometimes put day-to-day business things after making sure that I've worked on myself because I know that this ship only goes as far as I take it, right? Yeah. So it's kind of like putting that oxygen mask on yourself before someone else kind of idea.
Yeah. We love to ask guests too, how do you personally dial in? And I'll give you a bit of context. Okay. So you've got a number of those big decisions to make, or a few of them, right? But they're large decisions, right? And you know that decision is coming up. How do you personally prepare to dial in for that moment?
Well, everything in life is compound. It's exponential growth, okay? Yeah. Pretty much you can break that down in any sense. Knowledge is compound. So I have been reading an hour a day since I'm like 16, 17 years old. Yeah. And appropriate things that I pick, whether it's on leadership, finance, economics, psychology, physics, whatever I choose that I'm studying at that point, all of that information compounds. Okay, so the information store is already there. When it comes up to a situation, you make a decision, you don't even realize that might have been something you had read and is built upon 5 years ago, but you just know the answer. The second thing is you have to make sure your mind is clear to be able to actually pull upon that information. And that to me is dialing in, like making sure your mind's clear, you don't have distractions. I'll give a weird example maybe for the podcast, but like even something as little as like if somebody has a girlfriend or boyfriend that is very time consuming and mentally consuming and it's pulling you out of your focus, like discarding all of those kind of distractors to keep your frequency clear, or even like certain friends that you may have that pull you out to be going out when you shouldn't be going out, things like that. Like a lot of it is removing the distractions and keeping the brain clear so that when it does come time to make a decision, you can actually access that information you've absorbed, right? Yeah.
Yeah, those are great points. And I'm curious with someone that has so many things too on the go, right? Because when you're working with a light team, a lean team, right? It's yourself wearing many hats. Yeah. How do you manage your day-to-day tasks? Are you a pen and paper guy? You keep a diary? Are you kind of like a checklist person?
A diary. It would be a journal, right?
A journal, yeah.
No, I don't. So at any given time, like today probably I have 40, 50 people working for me. Yeah. You know, we get up to 100 people a day on construction sites. Yeah. It's getting good people around you that you use, right? Like same as you, how you have these employees that are great around you and putting trust in them to make the right decisions. Yeah. And for me, it's kind of like just being like a helicopter around all my areas. Like just walking by and being like, okay, this is great. Maybe change this, or this is more important. That's important to me. I do something. Do you know who Andy Frisella is? Yeah. Yeah, so 75 hard, which I do once a year, by the way. Okay. Andy Frisella, this I learned when I was like 18, something called the power list. Yeah. Every morning I wake up and I sit at my desk, probably not healthy for people that like to dunk their heads in ice buckets. Right. I don't do that. I roll straight to the office. Yeah. 5 critical tasks. Yeah. I write in the date. Today's Monday. These are the 5 things that must get done today. Yeah. And I just attack those things. And that is kind of how I keep everything moving, because I find that a lot of people that are very busy throughout the day don't necessarily get that much done because you get too distracted. But those 5 things allow me to anchor myself in saying, even if I didn't do anything else today, if I get these 5 things done, the business will move forward at the rate that I need it to move forward. So that's really powerful. Yeah. And those are very high value items, right? Yeah. Yeah. And it's usually things you don't, like a lot of times it's things that you don't want to do, right? Like it doesn't matter what stage you are in your life. Like sometimes there's calls that you dread, or meetings that you dread, or situations that make you uncomfortable. It's like, if it's on the list, you know, your day doesn't finish until that list is done, and you just live by that. You know, if you have one item left and you're like, I could do it tomorrow, it doesn't work like that. Like you made that deal with yourself. These 5 items are getting crossed off. So And oftentimes when people say that they're stressed or overwhelmed, they know what needs to be done, right? It's not like it's an unknown. Like you know, if you did these things, you'd feel less stressed. You're just afraid of doing them. Stress comes from inaction. That's it. Yeah.
And now dealing with construction trades, right? So oftentimes, would you say that your habits and the way that you've built your company kind of extends onto the trades that you hire to work for you?
Yeah, definitely. Like I'll give you an example. We built this project called Randolph Suites, and it was student housing, you can't be late because students move in September 1st. You got to put everybody in hotel rooms, and it's very expensive.
Yeah.
So we were getting close to the wire where it wasn't going to be finished on time.
Yeah.
And I started straight up sleeping like there and like laying on the hardwood floor, taking like 15-minute power naps. And everybody saw that, every worker for there. And then it just started happening. Like they used to work 8 hours. Now people are working 10.
Yeah.
Now people are showing up on Sundays. Now people are showing 14. So it's like, I'm a big fan of Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
He used to lead every battle from the front line.
Yeah.
And that's how he got this excellence from his troops. And I think that every single position in business is the same. It's hard for people around you not to respect you if they're going, no matter how hard I work, this guy is the one that has all the money or whatever it is, right? And he's still out working all of us. It's just people get inspired, right?
Yeah.
And so that's big.
And you wouldn't ask them to do anything that you wouldn't do
Never.
yourself.
Well, I mean, outside of things that I don't know how to do, right?
Yeah. And now when you're giving them their scopes of work, so obviously you give them a set of drawings, they have a scope of work, right? How do you manage sort of the project management side of the business, the actual construction of the developments?
Well, I know that there's a lot of room for improvement in terms of systems. I just know how to build something. To me, it's really not that complicated. So I kind of just in my head clock them all in. Like right now we're doing 9 buildings simultaneously. And for me, I just know where every single building is at, what needs to be done today, what needs to be done by Friday. I just kind of store it all in my mind.
Yeah.
So that's how I do it. So I just know, like when I walk on site, I'm like, this needs to be done by Friday. Probably as I grow more, we're going to need to put some sort of software, right?
Yeah.
But right now, it's just all mental.
And nice thing about your developments too is because they're purpose-built rental properties, there's a lot less variance than if you were building custom units where you had to wait on decisions to be made.
Yeah.
Right. There's a scope from day one, and that scope rarely changes, right?
Absolutely.
Unless you run into a pipe you didn't mean to dig, right, or something along those lines.
Of course.
And what was your decision to go the route of rentals versus for purchase and just sell off a property?
I wanted to become wealthy, not rich. That was the main thing because I said, okay, I really don't like doing things and getting paid once.
Yeah.
I've always had this mentality. I hate it. It's like all that work and I get rewarded one time. Bothers me. Now I know there could be like capital efficiency where you look at your after tax and maybe it was a wiser move to sell and go out. But for me, it's just like cash flow is stability. I think if you're looking to build wealth long term, your number one step, and this is opposite to what other people believe. So you don't need to follow my advice. Cash flow first. You build a big enough cash flow base, that cash flow will allow you to expand into other sectors because you always have cash coming in. And that cash can support your necessary infrastructure. It can support the employees you need to be able to expand. And let's say, like right now, we're in this recession where a lot of builders are just not building at all.
Right.
For me, it doesn't really matter. Like nobody internally would notice because there's cash flow.
Yeah.
It's a cash flow basis. Whereas if you're just dependent on developing now, you're laying people off, you're in a different financial situation. So I think cash flow is the most important thing in any business. And to focus on building that first is wise. And I know that's counterintuitive to what other people think, but that's my philosophy.
Yeah. My nonna, Italian heritage, always told me, chi mangio poco, mangio sempre, right? Where you eat little at a time, but you eat forever.
Yeah.
Right? And sort of like your idea of maybe I make a little less this time, but I'm still making money next month and the month after.
And that is an Italian philosophy, huh? They're always snacking throughout the day.
Exactly. No huge meals, right?
Yeah, I noticed that.
And dinners are 4 or 5 hours. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about leverage too, because you mentioned having 9 projects on the go. Like, how does someone, leverage their capital to spread it across 9 projects?
Well, 7 of them are mine, 2 are for customers. So we do GC for other people as well.
Okay.
So I have 2 customers. We're building, 12, 18, 30 rooms, 30 student rooms for other people out of the 121. And so that's not my capital. Obviously, I'm just getting paid a general contractor fee.
Yeah.
For all of mine, look, I've just always been an all-in kind of guy, and I've never taken money out. Since I was 17, I started investing. I've never taken it out. When I came to Windsor, I was a real estate agent. I never paid myself $1 from real estate income. It all went back into the business, and I only lived off the cash flow that I had back then, right? And as my cash flow has grown, now I live off of a percentage of the cash flow, and even that cash flow gets reinvested in the business.
Yeah.
Because, my philosophy has always been Well, a lot of people ask me, why don't you buy sports cars, a mansion, or things like that? Because I get way more joy out of building a bigger project or changing a neighborhood or pushing my limits of what I'm capable of, I guess, in a way, how big the empire can become versus having some luxury good. I've just really never gotten a kick out of that.
Yeah.
So over time, even if you're not a good investor, if you started at 17, you're 29, I'm kind of old, right? It's 12 years. You're going to have some sort of pot of gold, right?
Yeah.
If you've just been reinvesting every single time. So that's kind of how it works.
Yeah. And you're in it for the long run.
Yep.
And you told me a beautiful story too about your dad and how you were able to reach the height of retiring him.
Right.
And
well, not much retirement for him. I mean, he's working 12 hours a day right now. So
with you.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can tell me a little about like, how is it working with your dad and how is it having him on site?
It's amazing, man. It's, we have similar cultures. You're Italian, I'm Serbian.
Yeah.
So family is everything. Family is number one. In fact, so both my parents worked in a factory. Okay. And when I first got to university, this is about age 16, 17, I think 17, the background on my phone was my mom wearing her factory outfit. And I was always like, all right, step number one, get her out, right? Yeah. Because for my dad, it's one thing, but for a lady, it's no place, for a lady to be. I prefer that she's not in a factory. So that was my goal, get enough cash flow to get them out. So thankfully, just this last January, I was able to do that. Yeah. My mom's living life, man. She's, I get her to do leases for me. So maybe like an hour a day, if that. And she's just loving life right now. And my dad is, same as probably your father would be, is just a workaholic and he just can't sit down. So he just is on site for 12 hours a day. Yeah. 6 to 6 every single day.
Yeah. I also work with my dad every day too. He's awesome. Sitting right over there.
Oh, that's your dad right there? That's awesome.
Yeah. No, and it's incredible too. But I was just thinking down to what you're doing right now with your developments. So I think just a quick story about your mom, that first co-signing, I think keeping that document into where you've come today, right? What would you say are the most important lessons for young people that want to become developers or want to be in your position?
I think it doesn't matter what you want to do, whether it's developer, artist, anything. I think there's a book that I read when I was really young that changed my life, Think and Grow Rich. Yeah. And it comes pretty much down to having a burning desire for something and actually removing the limitations that other people put on you and that you hear from the social crowd and just truly believing in yourself. But it has to be a burning desire. Yeah. It can't just be, it'd be cool if I was a developer. It's like, in my head, it was, I have to achieve this. Yeah. This is a must for me. It has to get done. And people are pretty crafty and like, if you really have that belief and you put it as a mandatory, you're gonna achieve it. I really believe, whether you're above average intelligence, medium intelligence, even if you're a little bit below intelligence, if you have that belief in yourself and the desire at that level, you're gonna hit it. Just how long will it take you to hit it? Yeah.
Hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard, right?
Yeah, you gotta just really want it. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And talk a little bit about the marketing and branding. Does that piece come into play with your developments or is there such a demand that these properties are selling out before?
This is something new that we just implemented this year. We never had branding before. Yeah. So there's kind of like a perfect storm in student housing in Windsor where we have the international visa cap. Yeah. Okay. And then also at the same time, record new supply coming on the market. And there's a saying from Patrick Bet-David, if you know who that is, only the paranoid survive. I've always been like that. I'm always paranoid. Yeah. So I'm always like, okay, worst case scenario, this is what happens. I'm like, all right, build out the website, build out the brand, start taking over Google Ads, like go, warfare on this to make sure everything's rented out. And like, we're 90% rented in June, just way ahead of schedule. But for me, I'd always rather be over prepared and maybe had spent a little extra on marketing than not have something rented out, right? Yeah. That's where the branding came from. And then at a certain point, we kind of just expanded it. Like when I did Devonshire Row, for example, I used my last name. And I'll tell a little bit of a story of that. So I'm from a really small town, and my last name is Agbaba. Yeah. Agbaba. It's very hard to pronounce when people read it. Like I'm sure even when you saw it, it's like kind of a stutter thought. One time I was even in a tennis tournament, and the guy was announcing. He's like, Marko, well, you're the only Marko here. He couldn't even pronounce it. So I got teased about it a lot when I was younger. And I was kind of like, I think one day I would like that everybody recognizes this name and it's a name of importance. And so I kind of tied it to the brand. And now you'll see, like, if you ever drive by any of our construction sites, it's like, almost as visible as Trump's last name. Like I'm just throwing it down everywhere.
Yeah.
And now it's starting to catch. Like it has some sort of uniqueness to it. So I think it's funny. I think it's, again, kind of one of those things where you can pretty much force anything into reality if you want it bad enough, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when I first visited your site and did a little bit of background, I thought it was a luxury name that you came up with.
Yeah.
Right. And turns out to be your family name. So you should be proud of that too.
Thank you.
Right?
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And so Devonshire Heights, or Devonshire Row, sorry. That's a really exciting project. And
It is.
that was nearly, that's going ahead right now? Is that currently under construction?
We'll probably be in council. I mean, I don't know, maybe in 2-3 months we'll be in council for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when it comes to that project, you're transitioning a little bit because we talked a lot about student housing, but what would you categorize your new market as? What would you call that segment?
Look, I think it's going to be young families and young professionals that live there, right? I think Walkerville is the up and coming area in Windsor, and everybody wants to live here, but where exactly are you going to live? You know, are you going to live in a 120-year-old house that hasn't been renovated and still pay a premium on it? So we want to bring young, successful and ambitious and happy families to Walkerville. They need somewhere to live.
Yeah.
And so that's why kind of what gave me the idea of it. And I think Devonshire Row is such a magical project because we really dipped into the heritage aspects of that design. And I really wanted to build something where I hope it gets listed as a heritage property and lasts here for 200 years because maybe even if you edit it, show the design of it on the screen, it's just truly a beautiful design on that one.
It is. Yeah. And what were really popular was the homes on Monmouth.
Okay.
And it gives me the same similar vibe, right? With
but there's a little bit of a difference.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Monmouth was constructed for the frontline workers of the plants, right? Whereas Devonshire is for the executives.
Yeah.
So this is a mental note that I made to myself.
Yeah.
It must be better than Monmouth because Monmouth was for, at that time, the workers. And I want this to be for executives. So it has to be over and above Monmouth. But I do love those developments too. It's great.
Yeah. How does the layout change? How do the finishes change? Are there
compared to student housing? You mean? Significantly.
Yeah,
it's an entirely different ballpark, right? Two different targeted markets, and that was a learning curve for me, making sure that I build for that market, right? Not bringing student housing. Obviously, your price per square foot is going to be more expensive. You're going more luxurious.
Yeah.
We already are a luxury brand in student housing.
Yeah.
So already used to doing the high end, but obviously Devonshire demands and deserves a different level of luxury. So it's different for sure.
Yeah. And that's not the only exciting new project you have for young professionals and young families.
Yeah.
You also have Riverside Vista.
Yeah, River Vista.
River Vista, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really exciting one. I think I don't know which one I'm more excited about because I love 1920s, early 1900s architecture, clothing, everything about that time period I've always loved. And to build Devonshire Row is like getting to go back 100 years and build something. So that tickles, the art in me. River Vista is just awesome because, you've got a 4-story building right on the water, floor to ceiling windows. We have the corner units are 15 feet wide where it's all floor to ceiling glass, and then 20 feet down the corner, all floor to ceiling glass. And it's just like, to be able to build something like that, pretty much I'll be 30 years old at that point.
Yeah.
It's just cool. So that one's cool. This one's like tickling a art passion. Yeah.
And it sounds like you really get involved with the design and the architecture, right? You don't just hand it off. No. You like being a part of that process.
Yeah, actually all the student housing that we've ever built, I've designed the floor plans with pen and paper.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure architects probably don't love dealing with me because I'm very particular about what I want to build. And then architects, obviously their job is to elevate what you bring to the table. But they should not be the designer or the creative. I think that should be, the onus should be on the developer, right? You're the one with the vision. So it should be on you to design it.
Well, I would say from our perspective, dealing with clients, we prefer decision over indecision. Yeah. So if you know exactly what you want, the process goes a lot smoother too.
For sure. It's easier for the architect too, right? Because even if the architect designs something beautiful, it might not be what you had in mind. And it's like, nothing negative about the architect's work, but it's like the architect is not a mind reader.
Right.
The more specific you can be with them, then it's going to be easier for everybody, right?
Yeah. So I'm curious too, being a younger guy in this industry. How do you have many friends that are also kind of in this industry, or have you met some other developers that have been mentors to you now that you are in Windsor? You mentioned a mentor when you were back at Laurier.
Yeah.
You're building your circle kind of here in Windsor?
Well, the mentor back in Waterloo was not a mentor. He did not spend any time with me.
Okay.
He just allowed me to be inside of the business.
Okay.
And it was up to me to figure out and pull the information that I wanted to pull in the information. I've actually never had a mentor in my life. I've never had that. And I've never really had a friend or something that is ahead of me where I can watch the path. And I actually think that's the biggest gift I've ever been given, because it forces you to use your own genius. And everybody has genius inside of them, right? But it's hard to tap into that. And when you have no direction and no leader or example to follow, you have to make it up yourself. And it makes you be creative and do it your own way. And that's why I think the way that I've done things is so different than anybody else has ever done it, because of that, because I just, made it up as I went along. And I think that's a cool way to live life.
Yeah. So you've been a trailblazer on your own for some time now, for the last 12 years of your career.
Yeah.
If you were to, you were mentioning expanding the company, expanding the team, who would be the next hire of Agbaba?
Project management.
Yeah.
I love construction, but I'm getting too old for that, man. Being on construction sites all the time. Probably project management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And would that person, would they manage all the sites and then report back to yourself?
That's what I would like ideally. Yeah. I mean, you spend I would still want to negotiate all the deals with the trades and pick the people, but I just would like, for example, make sure this material's here this day or this trade's on site this day. I don't need to be involved in that. That would be my first next hire. And actually, the leasing agent. Yeah. Yeah, because that takes a lot of time too.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of negotiation in leasing back and forth, or is
leasing? There's no negotiation. We're a luxury product similar to like a Mercedes-Benz. That's the price of the Mercedes-Benz. If you want it, that's what you get. In trades, construction, huge negotiating. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And how did you navigate that when you were, obviously a bit younger and maybe they weren't taking you as seriously?
When I was a little pup, I got slapped around, man. Yeah. I wasn't getting any negotiation done. You know what I mean? You pretty much take what you can get. I also had no experience in construction. Yeah. And I am like, if my friends from college and high school, when they see them a developer, probably laugh, because like I'm not the guy that goes and fixes something. Yeah. That's never been me. Yeah. So now that I was in construction, when I started, I don't know what's going on. The way I would do it is, this is how I learned pretty much. Today's foundation day. YouTube.com. Things to watch out for when pouring foundation. Okay, make sure X, Y, and Z doesn't happen. If X, Y, and Z happens on the site, call it out. Yeah. That's pretty much how you learn, right? Same as learning how to ride a bike. Yeah. But in terms of negotiation, very unsuccessful. Yeah. Yeah.
I can remember a particular point in my career, and it wasn't too long ago, but that moment of sitting in a negotiation and sticking to my guns, right? And then from that moment, that day forward, it's been totally different in negotiations. Can you pinpoint a moment where you were negotiating and then it was just that day?
No, because I've always been quite good at negotiations since I was young, just not in construction because I didn't feel comfortable. Yeah. Because I was also quite young, and these people are experienced, older, and I think maybe being outside my element for that reason I didn't. So there wasn't really a pinpoint. I think I have a different perspective on negotiation than other people do. Yeah. I'm not trying to get every last dollar of my side. I'm trying to make it very mutually beneficial. Yeah. Because oftentimes it's not necessarily the same thing that's important to both of us. Yeah. Okay, let's say, for example, the most important thing for me is speed and price. Maybe the most important thing for you is for you to be able to have your trades without having to transport. So my main thing is what is important to you. Yeah. And oftentimes people won't tell you that. It's up to you to figure that out based on clues of what they're saying. Yeah. And I try to help you on that to make it a good deal for you while helping me on my side what's important to me. So my main goal with negotiation is for both of us to win. Yeah. And that's always been my style. Like if you can have a negotiation scenario where both people leave being like, oh yeah, I won that negotiation. That's perfect. That's where you want to be.
You probably heard of Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference.
No, I don't know who Chris Voss is. No.
Okay. So he was a hostile negotiator for the FBI, and he talks a lot about never splitting the difference, right? Okay. So you may have a number, subcontractor may have a number, let's meet in the middle. Because really, like what you just said there, how can we make this a win-win scenario for both of us? It's a much different approach than just sheer numbers. Yeah. Right? Because you probably work with a lot of the same trades too, over and over. And these trades, if they do well on the project and the project is a lot more efficient or faster than what you had imagined, then there's more projects for all.
Exactly.
Right? So do you work with a lot of the same trades on project over project?
So the way I do is I have every year or every project, I have my immovables.
Yeah.
The people that I loved working with did a great job. Those are immovable. Everybody else is up for bid.
Yeah.
If I liked you, you were good, but you weren't great, you're up for bid.
Yeah.
You have to resubmit your bid and bid out the project again. That's how I do it. And I'm always trying to find that perfect team. But I'm like a pretty loyal person by default. My electrician is the same one I had 6 years ago before I started building.
Yeah.
My painter is the same one. And actually my painter, I've never asked him to give me a quote.
Yeah.
Just because he's shown supreme loyalty to me. He's never let me down. So I'm the same way with him. Just send me the invoice at the end. So I have people that have been there since the very beginning.
Yeah.
And then there's other people that I move around to, make the team efficient. So
yeah. And are you at the point now too where you've done so many projects that if you have an idea in your mind, you go to your trades first to gather their pricing? Or are you pretty well aware of what you're
I know what it's going to cost. Yeah. I mean, at this point, you know what it's going to cost roughly. There's some things that differ per project that you might want to get quotes on. Like, I mean, most of the things are charged per square foot, so you can do the math, right? But some things maybe would be a plumbing or HVAC if you have a particular complex design. But most of the things you can pretty much just know.
Yeah.
Like I said, at this point, if I'm looking at a land deal, I don't need to run an Excel. I can tell you within 30 seconds what I'd be willing to pay for that land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how are you currently finding these opportunities for land?
Well, it depends because build to sell, I think, is pretty much impossible. A lot of deals that exist right now is even if you got the land for free, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And I'll go into talking to you about Devonshire Row after and how I ended up purchasing that deal with that logic.
Yeah.
But if you're creative and you kind of know things one step ahead of the curve, you can make some profitable moves for sure. But I think the most important thing is location.
Yeah.
Which location and what your ambitions are as a developer. Are you just trying to make money on a development? Then there's probably lots of options. Or are you very specific, trying to change neighborhoods, trying to build a city into something that it hasn't been? That gets more complex, right?
Yeah. How much attention do you pay to the developers that are around you and what they're building?
Zero.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have my idea of what the city should become.
Yeah.
And it's a very detailed vision and exactly the sequence that needs to be done of how to build it.
Yeah.
I don't really care what anyone else is doing, what city they're doing it or what area or what. I've never looked at competitors.
Yeah.
I just don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You shared with me a very interesting vision of the future of connecting Wyandotte from Windsor corridor down to the Walkerville corridor.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of explain the way that you see that? If you want?
So I have a vision for the city. The coolest thing about Windsor is the population supports it. The proximity to Detroit with the resurgence of Detroit, being a logistics hub with the Gord Howe Bridge, and now you're getting a mega hospital.
Yeah.
We have everything we need to become a legitimate city.
Yeah.
Except for infrastructure and things to do. It's a boring city for the most part, right? So my vision is to build Windsor into an actual legitimate city. And because you're building it from scratch with proper design, you could really make it one of the best cities in the country because you're building it from scratch. You don't have to play around pre-existing things. My plan is that it starts from the bottom. The bottom being you have an opportunity as you have 18,000 people at the University of Windsor coming from Toronto, Waterloo, all these other places. You can steal this talent from those cities. As long as you make it attractive enough for them while they're studying here, they might say, you know what, why don't I stay in Windsor? And you're effectively brain draining, stealing brain power from different cities. Yeah. And you can build that. But as it stands right now, try to put yourself in their shoes. You're 20 years old, you come to Windsor. You show up on Wyandotte right in front of the University of Windsor. One-story buildings everywhere, run-down buildings. You say, let's go downtown. Homeless people everywhere, not much nightlife. What is the incentive for you to stay in Windsor? So my first plan is I need to build an ecosystem attractive enough to retain the talent that we're getting. Because if we're able to retain that talent, then they're going to have children here and they're going to bring family members, et cetera, et cetera. You can build a community that way. The next is there needs to be a node for fun. Yeah. There needs to be an entertainment district, somewhere people go, feel safe, can dress up, have a good time, socialize with people. It's an important part of community. I think Walkerville stands to be that. It's just not built up properly right now. And I think Rosati has done just a fantastic job with what they've done so far, but we need much more. And pretty much if you can connect those two hubs, that's step one of building a great city. And that could probably be done in a half decade. Yeah. It doesn't take that long to do that.
And we notice it every day because we drive down Wyandotte to come here to the office. But there is about maybe 100-meter radius just down Wyandotte if you're going east. That is really well built up.
Yep.
But then the further and further you go west towards Windsor, that's where the work can happen.
And it's like Windsor is built up in places it shouldn't be built up. Like, you know, for example, last year we hit our new build record.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Yeah.
Because when I'm downtown, I'm in Walkerville, I'm in Little Italy. Where's the development? You're building it in, you know, suburbs, Huron Church and stuff. You're not building a city. You're spreading the big town.
Yeah.
You're making a big town. You're spreading the population. That's not how you build a city. It must be dense in the right locations. So that's the most important thing that a city can do. And I hope that the City of Windsor Planning Department is, you know, becoming more aligned with that vision.
Yeah.
Because in the past, we've always been a big town. And if they can switch their thinking to become a big city, or a small city at the very least, Windsor can be very successful. Because like I said, you're building from a blank slate. Go pick in any of these major corridors, you can find one-story commercial buildings.
Yeah.
You know, build them to 6 stories, mixed use.
Yeah.
Make it walkable.
Yeah.
And I think we have to disregard our previous notion of you need 30 parking spots for every unit.
Right.
Like, if you're going to actually make a true walkable community, then what do you even need the parking for? Right?
Yeah.
It's going to be walkable. So things like that, I think that a lot of these buildings, and like you're saying, when you go down Wyandotte towards Riverside,
Yeah.
it's dense in the wrong locations. It has no impact on the enjoyability of the city. you
Yeah.
know?
You talk a little bit about the amenities too, in the development that you're doing. So in order to do that, you can't just build units, right? There's got to be more to it, right? There's got to be alleyways or cobblestones. Like
Yeah.
Detroit does a great job of, they've revitalized some of their darker alleys and turned them into little piazzas, right? They got tables along the side and they got nice lights, right? You just turned an alley that most people wouldn't walk down to now it's packed with people and energy. So what kind of amenities or common spaces would you plan in some of your developments?
The alley is phase 4. Right now, let's build the corridors first, because Detroit's already a pre-built corridor, because this used to be a superpower, right?
Yeah.
So Windsor, first we got to build the corridors. Properly, I'm a big fan of Tampa, Florida. I spent a lot of time there. There's a huge development called Water Street.
Okay.
It's funded by Bill Gates, and I can't remember the name of the gentleman. He owned Tampa Bay as well, Lightning.
Yeah.
So the way they designed it is so every single lounge or restaurant or barber shop or salon is hand-picked based off of accessibility, walkability, and building that community vibe. Every tree that's planted on the street is there for design.
Yeah.
So that's the number one way to do it. If you take Wyandotte, for example, let's just say in Walkerville, you already have the pieces of greatness for a walkable community. You have the restaurants in the right spot. You have them grouped together. So it becomes, if somebody goes to restaurant A, they can walk to restaurant B afterwards for a cocktail. Things like that, things that are synergistic in shopping can create a very walkable feels. You just need to expand upon it in Walkerville. So in terms of amenities, it's not necessarily important that you build external amenities, it's that you plan the existing buildings the right way. And by doing mixed use and commercial on the main level, it allows you to do that if it's properly thought out. But that's the developer's responsibility. And unfortunately for the city, they have no control over that. Because if Tom, the developer, decides, I want to put a cannabis shop here and I want to put a variety store with no thought to it, you're going to ruin the walkability of that neighborhood.
Right.
And that's a tough spot for the city to be in. For Devonshire Row, the way I designed it was, instead of doing a 3rd story on the top, I removed the 3rd story and put it as a separate row of towns in the back. And the reason I did that was to open up a courtyard.
Yeah.
And so this courtyard is 20 feet wide by 172 feet long. And that allowed me, in London, England, this is very popular. That allowed me to have a true walkable community space, which is very unique to Windsor. But again, encouraging walkable community space, right? Encouraging pedestrian traffic to go in there, socialize, hang out. Everything I do in Walkerville, I think the focus will be walkability.
Yeah. And right now with that courtyard, are you going to plan to put anything like, is there tables? Is there a fire pit? Or are there?
For sure. There's going to be stuff. I'm not going to design this.
Yeah.
I'm going to hire this out to a designer, because it's so important that it can't be left up to chance. It has to be professionally done.
Yeah.
So they'll decide exactly what we need to put in there to make it walkable.
Yeah. One thing I think we miss out on a lot too in a lot of these developments we see in these multi-million-dollar homes that are being built is the landscaping.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
Is the topography, is the
Yeah.
hardscapes, right? A lot of times all the money is put into the building.
Yeah.
Then you look around and it's still got dirt or it doesn't have a driveway yet or
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just has grass,
Yeah.
right? How important is landscaping when it comes to these?
Even our student housing portfolio.
Yeah.
Go to any one of our properties, very beautifully landscaped.
Yeah.
It is so important to
Yeah.
do landscaping. It's the little things that count the most for curb appeal, right? It feels inviting, it feels clean, and it also changes the street.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a bunch of new construction projects and they're all beautifully landscaped, now that street is beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter how good the building looks. If you got overrun grass or like no thought coming into the landscaping, it looks terrible. So I think it's a very small expense for how much it means, you know?
Yeah. Now you did have a town hall meeting for Devonshire Row.
Mm-hmm.
How was the feedback?
You mean the public meeting?
Public meeting, yeah.
Well, Devonshire Row is an interesting project because it's already been approved for a 4-story apartment building.
Okay.
Okay, that's approved, and the neighbors were so upset about it. They challenged it. They went to the OLT 2 times to stop this development. And I came in and I said, look, I see that you don't like it. Let's change the development. And I actually was able to cut the size of the development in half.
Yeah.
Same density, one more unit than was already proposed, but half the height by doing this split townhome with courtyard. So if I was the first one to choose a development on that location, I'm sure people wouldn't be happy because people just don't like development. But because I'm going in and saying, I'll stop the 4-story apartment building and we'll build these rows of towns instead, it was quite popular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it fits with the area quite
It does.
well because it's a fairly residential dense area, right? There
sure.
aren't any 4-story buildings nearby.
No, it was a weird fit. I don't know why that was approved there, but the townhouses make way more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was it going to your first few public meetings and approaching the town?
I don't mind it. I mean, I'm pretty big on public opinion and public
Yeah.
support. I've always kind of been like that. I'm like quite social person too, so I'm
Yeah.
always knocking on doors like, hey, allow me to introduce myself. I'm probably going to build something in this location, so this is what I'm thinking. For River Vista, I knocked on all the doors and kept all the neighbors in the loop, even during the design process. Like, hey, here's a new revision. What do you think? The whole time.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you are changing people's lives as a developer.
Yeah.
Right? People live here, and where you live is very important. Some people have lived here for 20, 30 years, maybe more. So I think it's a respect thing. You should respect their land and their area. So I have no issues with talking to the public. I like it.
Yeah. And some of the best learning too.
For sure.
Right? We talked about going door to door for some developments and
Yeah.
then you talk about communities and the only way you're going to build that community is if everyone's on board for the vision.
And isn't it a much better experience when you walk on your development site and people smile and wave at you instead of yelling at you?
Yeah,
I've always
100%.
loved that. Same with customers, right? You should
Yeah.
always treat people with respect and you get respect in return.
Yeah. And then when you go to do another development and you build that reputation, right?
Yeah.
You've built that reputation with the students and now you're building it with the young professionals and the young families.
For sure. Yeah.
Right? So there's definitely a brand being built around Agbaba.
Yeah, I hope so.
And I'm excited to see it continue to flourish because these larger projects this is your first time doing this many units,
Yeah,
right?
this is definitely a transformative year going from what we've done. And we've built a lot of student housing, like around 220 rooms or something like that.
Yeah.
But the impact is less because they're infill developments.
Right.
Now when you're talking these bigger standalone projects, it changes neighborhoods much more, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're making a splash, right? Because
Yeah.
you've done 4plexes, you've done
9 plexes,
9
6
plexes.
plexes.
But now you're going 46, right?
Yeah, 46.
24.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited that a couple years from now, the company's going to be known for these larger projects and knowing your personality and knowing your approach, I'm sure they're only going to get larger.
I hope so.
Yeah.
We'll hope so, unless I make a big mistake
Yeah.
somewhere.
What role do you see software playing in the development world?
Man, I remember we were talking last time. I'm the worst with technology ever. I need software and everything. I mean, project management is going to be huge. Rental, like property management is big. Accounting, everything needs software, right?
Yeah.
I think any business, no matter what stage you are, and especially now, it's relatively inexpensive compared to what it would have been, way back when. So I think it's just necessary.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to get lost in the sauce.
Yeah. So when it comes to organizing your trades too, right? They have to get all the information because at the end of the day, if they don't have the drawings, they don't have the specs, they don't have the instructions, they can't perform their job. So how are you currently getting the trades, their information? Are you sharing drives? Is it an email? Is it text messages? Is it?
Well, you have permit drawings.
Yeah.
It's one document. You have permit drawings. Every single trade needs to have permit drawings. You have printed out permit drawings on site.
Yeah.
Permit drawing is the contract.
Yeah.
Everything has to go as according to the permit. If your wall is at 6 inches, but it was supposed to be at 5 on the permit, that wall is wrong by 1 inch.
Right.
So permit trumps everything else.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, it's for projects like this, I'm sure once I build River Vista, 46 units, I'm sure I'm in for a surprise, right? Just as I was my first build. But for what I'm doing now, I mean, it seems to be fine with just permit drawings and yeah.
Do you get a lot of questions, do you find? I know a lot of builders talk about that.
Like from trades?
Yeah.
Constantly. Yeah. Constantly.
And so you're fielding those phone calls, right?
Well, I'm on site a lot too. So a lot of it's in person, right? But I do definitely get calls a lot, like come down here, do this. But usually I'm there.
Yeah.
Like pretty much during my day, I do like multiple rounds where I'm just floating around every single project, just being available.
Yeah.
So most of those questions come in person. We pull out the prints, look at it together.
Yeah.
This is what needs to be done, and then move forward.
Okay. And then when it comes to leasing, are you do you have your ongoing list of leads that you would approach for those leases, or do you go out to market? Because you do have that realtor experience as well.
Yeah, I've been leasing rooms since I was 17 years old. You know, I'm an old timer in the game, so I've got it pretty much down to a science of how I do it at this point. Yeah.
Do you personally do all the leases
lease.
yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. So you don't necessarily hire out a sales team to.
No, but that's what I was saying when you were asking who I would hire. One would be that for sure, to hold down the fort with leasing, because at this point it's become a little bit bigger where it does take a lot of time.
Yeah.
But I've just been doing it for so long. It's just really efficient when I do it, right?
Yeah. You have the same template you can use over and over.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, okay, so 5 years from now, let's just look into the future. Let's say you've got these multi-unit buildings under your belt. And you're starting to build out the city. Would you see yourself moving out of Windsor, Walkerville, or do you see yourself staying in this area?
I made a commitment to myself that I will not leave this city until I've built it into a legitimate city.
Okay.
So if it takes me, I hope that I'll be able to do it within a decade.
Yeah.
That is my goal. If it takes me until I'm 50 years old, 60 years old, I don't care. That's a commitment I've made to myself and to the city.
Yeah.
So when it becomes a legitimate city, and, you know, it's talked about in textbooks of how to build cities properly, and people are very proud to be in Windsor and from Windsor, then at that point I'll probably start migrating some of, developing in different cities as well, and doing probably the same thing in different cities.
Yeah. And in 10 years from now, what do you want Agbaba Holdings development to be known for?
For building the city.
Yeah.
I think I've always had the vision where Hiram Walker started Walkerville and we finished it. You know, we built it to what it should be. But I think for the whole city, I think that what I would like to be remembered for in Windsor is finally making Windsor the city that it's always supposed to be.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's always been such a bad stigma of Windsor. When I was in Waterloo, I had it. Some people called it the armpit of Ontario. It's ridiculous. We have too many things going for us to be underperforming at that level. So I hope I'm remembered for bringing Windsor to the potential that it's always had and being the catalyst for that. That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And doing it for a certain population as well, right?
Yeah.
You have a very targeted market, and I find that a lot of developers who are very specific about their development types are the most successful.
Well, I'll build whatever the city needs me to build for it to become what it needs to become.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm focusing on these markets now is the first step is we have to secure young talent.
Yeah.
We have to keep it in Windsor once it comes here. So that's why I'm building things tailored to young people right now.
Yeah.
Well, it's the student housing and the Walkerville node, because I need to address them first. Once we have them content and staying, then we'll go on to whatever else needs to be built, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not really necessarily building things for profit, and I'm not necessarily building things for enjoyment. I'm building what does the city need to be able to become the city that it's destined to become. And you know, that's my focus.
Yeah. And what I found was cool too is when we were talking earlier is that you lived in your own properties, right?
Yeah.
So you truly believe.
I've lived in like 4 of my properties, and when I build Devonshire Row, I'll live there for sure as well, 100%.
Yeah. That's really cool, because then, you know, you obviously it shows how much you care, right? You're not necessarily living in a McMansion down the street, but you're actually ingrained in the developments that you're building.
Yeah, but one thing it's important because when you live there, it's different because you can see all the areas that you need to improve.
Yeah.
What's good, what's not good as a user experience. Can you hear the people upstairs? Can you
Yeah.
hear the people to the side? Is this bedroom a little smaller? Maybe it could have been a bigger closet.
Yeah.
All these things you get by living the product. And the other thing is I firmly believe we build the best product. So where else would I live? You know, it's going to be the best product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And you were mentioning too, we talked a little bit about finish selections and upgrades and kind of having someone to collaborate on those.
Yeah.
What's your process like in picking those selections?
So as of right now, and this is what you and I were talking, as of right now, I like to spend a lot of time in Tampa, Florida, Miami, wherever I'm choosing to be at that time. And I'm like a big different hotels, different condos I stay at for inspiration.
Yeah.
And I find things that I like and I bring them back here. You know, for example, for student housing, the cabinet designs and the color schemes we've done is actually taken from Tampa.
Okay.
Because Tampa has a very similar demographic they're building for, a young population.
Yeah.
And so I take a lot of ideas of things I like and don't like from there and I bring it back here. But as I was telling you, I'd really like at some point to get a team, whether it's you guys or who ends up being, is to help picking out those designs as well. Because as you start to scale and do more projects, it's really hard to spend the time it deserves for each specific product for the design, right?
Yeah. And you start to have a signature too, right? When you walk into one of your properties, you'll recognize immediately that, hey, this is a Agbaba project.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? A lot of our decisions are just data driven, as I was mentioning to you, because having done so much volume, and I'm sure yourself as well, but tracking what finishes are the most successful and getting that feedback from the clients. You're the current people who live inside of your buildings, right? Do you do kind of surveys with them after the fact and understand what they like about your properties? And
we don't, but you can genuinely tell with student housing based on retention rate.
Yeah.
Because students, they end up meeting new people while they're in school. The propensity for them to leave is quite high.
Yeah.
There's a lot of external drivers attracting them to different locations. If you get a higher and higher percentage, like for example, if you have 12 buildings and 2 of them have a 15% higher retention rate than every other one, now it's dive deeper. What exactly is it about this location that's driving the higher retention? So it's kind of data driven as well as what you're saying. I find that asking tenants for feedback has not been successful in the past because when you have a great relationship with the tenant, they're just everything's good.
Right.
If you have a tenant that doesn't like you, everything sucks. But I find it hard to get like specific feedback from tenants.
How do you manage, so Marko, for example, right? You have some people coming up to you saying, hey, can you be the GC for my project? Can we partner on this project? I'm sure you're getting opportunities quite often. How do you, I'm sure you vet the numbers and you vet the project first, but how do you stay focused on your properties? And
mine comes first.
Yeah.
Okay, and everybody knows that. If you ask me to JV or partner, the answer is no. So if
Yeah.
anyone's watching this wants a JV, the answer is no. I say no. I get a lot of offers for JVs. Not interested in doing it. GCing, I just have to like you. Like I have to genuinely like you, and you have to be willing to work kind of the way I do construction. Like the 2 people I'm building for now, those are my great friends.
Yeah.
And so we have a great relationship and we enjoy. It's like we get to spend time together building it. So I enjoy doing that. But I've had people that have asked me, will you build me a duplex or detached ADU? And if I don't really know you at all, it's not something I'm going to do.
Yeah.
At this point, it's a very small part of the business compared to what I'm doing internally, right?
Yeah.
So the priority is definitely on my own portfolio. And it just, if it's a close friend, I like them and it's fun.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see in the near future right now, during COVID, there were so many condos for sale, right? And now you're not seeing many condos go up for sale. You're seeing a lot more rental properties. Do you think the market's going to continue in that trend?
Well, it's interesting. I think that as unemployment continues to increase, and in Windsor, it'll certainly be the case. I don't know if you saw the news about 1 hour before we jumped on the podcast. Trump has discontinued trade negotiations with Canada and said that in 7 days he'll show the tariffs that are going to be paid by Canada. So essentially giving up on the trade deal. That'll probably change. He changes his mind all the time. If we're in a tough economic situation where unemployment is high, interest rates remain reasonably elevated, especially to counteract inflation coming from tariffs, puts you in a tricky spot. Home ownership will be low and rent will be more popular.
Yeah.
So that's going to encourage people to build more rentals. Another thing is the cost of construction, land acquisition, debt to bring to an end product and build new for sale is just quite unrealistic financially. So a lot of developers will go into rental-only buildings. So I think you'll see an increase in the supply. And now where that ends up, where the equilibrium is in 3 to 5 years, we'll see.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, new construction will mostly be rental.
And is that necessarily a bad thing, right? Because you think about a lot of these young people, right? Their parents, maybe they're immigrants to Canada. The dream was to get a job, buy a property or buy a home, and then that's your forever home. And that's sort of like you've made it, right? You've had kids, you've got your job, you own your property. Now a lot of the young people are leasing, right? And is that necessarily a bad thing?
If it all depends on the person, right? Because there's no right answer to this question. If people think entrepreneurial, and instead of wasting a capital, putting it into house, because that's like a drain of capital in a country. If everyone's just buying their principal residence and that's their savings account, that's unfortunate because that money could have been opening a coffee shop, opening an auto, whatever the business may be. If people think that way, then this is fantastic. Rent your car, rent your house, put all your money in businesses and grow the economy. Amazing. But people don't typically do that. They're going to end up just spending it on whatever things and not investing. So it's a net negative for them.
Yeah.
I think it just depends on people, because the great thing about a home is it's not necessarily a good investment, but for somebody that wouldn't have done anything else wise with their money, it's the best thing they could do because it's a forced investment. It's a forced savings account. Yeah. And when you choose to retire, you have something to help you with retirement, right?
Right. And one thing, your vision of having the 18,000 students in the University of Windsor stay here and providing the community and the housing and, the walkability for them.
Yep.
One thing that has to be true are the jobs, right?
For sure.
Having enough work for those 18,000 students. So
it's funny you say that because this challenge and it's a big challenge to build a city. Yeah. I'm very serious about doing it. And my biggest thought process is like, I really hope somebody helps me with jobs. Yeah. Because I really don't want to have to also do that. Yeah. But it can be done. There's a gentleman called Dan Gilbert. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, Rocket Mortgage.
Exactly. Pretty much rebuilt Detroit, the rebirth of Detroit. And I spent a lot of time in Detroit, every single weekend in Detroit last year. And wow, what an incredible job he did. And I read the book about him on how he did it and everything. He actually ended up just being like, screw it, I'll bring the jobs too. Yeah. And so it can be done. Yeah. But I'd prefer if somebody were willing to help with that. Hopefully city councilors and mayor and entrepreneurs like yourself. Yeah. That's why I was so happy that you were in Walkerville when we had first met, because I'm like, somebody like you, this young with this much staff in Walkerville, like that's exactly what we need, Yeah. And ideally, maybe some of those 18,000 students become employers. Yep. Right? They start their own business. And because maybe they're going out to Toronto or they're going to the bigger cities to start these companies because they feel like they need to. And they feel like they don't enjoy being here. Yeah. Right? And like young people want to have fun. Yeah. And if you bring them somewhere here where it is right now and how dull it is and boring, you're going to lose that. You have no chance of keeping that talent. Yeah. Because this town was designed to be a blue collar town. This is what it's been since the beginning of Windsor. And now things are changing. Yeah. And it's time that, we build them the proper infrastructure and we take advantage of what's occurring, because Windsor's got huge potential. Yeah. Huge. And our proximity to the U.S. is incredible. You can be there and back in 30 minutes. It's incredible. Yeah, absolutely. It's phenomenal. And now that Detroit is going under a resurgence, and Detroit, by the way, is switching, because they were a blue collar town the entire time. And obviously still predominantly they will be, but like in the downtown center, it's finance, fintech, technology, healthcare. Like it's completely changing. And what's really interesting about that too is Detroit, a lot of those larger companies, because Google has a headquarters there now, LinkedIn has a headquarters there, right? I don't know the actual date that they came there, but I'm assuming that what Dan did with that's what happened. Yeah, it's because of Dan. These large companies started to see that and they wanted to move over. There's something in cities called like an energy or vibe, right? People say vibe. There's an energy in cities. Yeah. And young people are very attuned to these energies. And if you can craft the energy, people will stay. And once you have the people, then employers want to be there. And it just all compounds right now, right? For example, I love Windsor. Walk down the downtown of Windsor. There's no excitement. There's no, I want to be here. I want to start something. I want to, make a life here. It's like, where's the next exit to get out of downtown? So that was what Detroit was like as well. And now go walk in Detroit on a Tuesday at 12 p.m. And tell me what you feel. And that happened over the span of a decade. Yeah. 10 years. One man. Yeah. And that whole company, Bedrock Development, right?
they're not just developers, right? You look at that company and they're building communities, and they're taking a very similar approach, maybe on a little different scale right now, but to
a little bit of a different scale.
To the approach that you're taking too, right? They're not just building to sell and to move things, right? They're building with intent, they're building with purpose, and they're building with the future in mind.
And they're investing in their communities.
Yeah.
A lot of those great things you see downtown, whether it's park rehabilitation, events that they hold, that's funded by Bedrock.
Yeah.
There's no profit return from him for doing that. But that's the way you build and resurge a community. And I think Windsor has the potential to do the same thing they did over there.
Yeah.
Maybe even better.
And it really takes the buy-in too from the cities, right? And I'm sure City of Detroit, when Dan had this master plan, he met with the city to get them on board.
Well, a lot of the projects required significant grants from the city to make them happen.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when he's going in and taking these old historic buildings and remodeling them back to life. There's a lot of tax breaks and grants put into that. And I think the city of Windsor would be willing to do the same. I think for the most part, the city of Windsor does want growth. Mm-hmm. I think the city of Windsor just stuck on how do we get growth?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the disconnect is. But I think if you have great entrepreneurs that come forward and lead them there, I think they will support. I think it will be supported.
Yeah. Have you had some really good interactions with the city of Windsor when you come to them with these proposals?
I've had good interactions. I've had bad interactions. It depends on who you get and where they are. But I would say I think we have a lot of city councilors who really care about their community.
Yeah.
And really work and really want growth. I've had the opportunity at this stage of my career to meet a lot of them personally.
Yeah. And
a lot of them are really great and really care. And I think that we have enough. I think we have more than we need to be able to do what we got to do.
Yeah. And what's really cool is having met with a number of municipalities ourselves as well when we launched that real estate development map I was showing you the other day, is how excited these townships and municipalities are about building. Right, it's one of their larger initiatives, right? Even the council, right? When it comes to the agenda, a large portion of it is, okay, what development do we have on the go? Right? It's a large topic of conversation.
Well, development is everything because you're building the city. Not only that, but you're building the tax base.
Yeah.
Look at River Vista, for example. Right now, there's a house there that the property tax is $6,000 per year.
Right.
You allow us to build the 46. What's the property tax for that? 120 across 10. You're making an extra 1.2 that you weren't before.
Yeah.
Per year. These things can really change. I think Ontario, Windsor especially, has a misunderstanding of what growth feeds growth means.
Yeah.
Growth feeds growth means get out of the way, allow it to grow, and the increased income due to the growth will support your community to build. Mm-hmm. Windsor's interpretation is, if they're growing, let's tax them so that we can use that money to build infrastructure. That's not, I think they're misunderstanding what that notion was supposed to mean. Yeah. In America, in Michigan, for example, just across the river here, you go to a city called Royal Oak, for example. Development fees are $0. Permit fees are $0. And in Windsor, to build a single family home, it's what, $45,000? They're trying to increase it to 80 or 70.
Yeah.
So why? That's not growth feeds growth. That's let developers pay for our growth. So I think it's just a miscommunication of what it should be.
And if you drive around Royal Oak, it's quite a nice area.
Yeah, it's great. Right. I think Royal Oak is great. I think Birmingham's great. Even Ferndale is starting to grow in those little areas. And it's, they have the true meaning of growth means growth. Let them build it. Let's not tax them. Let's make it easier for them. And they will pay us more taxes by default and employ a bunch of people who will, again, pay income taxes on that. The property taxes will be higher. That's what growth means growth is supposed to do.
Yeah. One thing that we've really noticed by spending more time in Michigan and working with some home builders over there is just speed. Right? Everything is about speed. How quickly can you get it to me? How quickly can we get it off the ground? There's very few delays in the development projects that they're doing.
Yeah, which is, I think Windsor has made a lot of progress.
Yeah.
But it's a huge roadblock. I mean, I could build River Vista 3 times by the time I get it approved.
Right.
That's unacceptable. It can't take me 3 times longer to get a permit or get just an approval saying, yeah, you can build it, than building the actual project. Yeah. That's a little bit too far, right? So there needs to be improvement for sure. And there needs to be more cooperation. I think a lot of times the city planning department has it in their head, I want this to go a certain way. I want it to be this, and there's no flexibility. And pretty much, instead of saying, look, I don't really love what you're proposing, but if you're set on doing this, maybe if you helped us with X, Y, Z, did this and this, it might allow us to, to approve it a little bit closer. But there's a lot of room for improvement on that side for sure. Like
Yeah.
even a building permit, like for a single family home can take like 3 months.
Yeah.
Why?
Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned some really good points, even about taking a single home, $6,000 in tax a year, and turning it into $120,000 tax dollars. Do you have the opportunity to put that into your application? Like, is there a section for you to
No,
give these great points?
there's no care. Like I've brought this up a million
Yeah.
times, believe me. They don't care.
Yeah.
They just don't care. It's not, yeah, I think it comes from the top. It's got to be a coordinated, same as when you run a business.
Yeah.
Your vision leads everybody that's sitting in this room, right? I think in the city, it's very fragmented. This group of people focus on this group of people focus on this. There's not one clear main objective. And I think that's got to be ironed up, but who knows? I'm not in their position. So who knows? Maybe that's the best it can be done, right? I don't know.
And I think too, once you start building out your portfolio and becoming more established, and you've proven it time and time again. I mean, it's funny. It reminds me of back in the day when we didn't have many companies who used our software. It was hard for companies to believe in it.
Yeah.
Right. Until we built stacks and stacks and stacks of proof that they saw others using it, and then they gave it a chance. Right.
Yeah.
It's probably similar with developments. Right. You have this amazing vision, and you've proven it many times over, but there's still more to be done.
Well, I think in Windsor as well, a significant challenge is they like development the way it's been done in the past. And as you know as well, exactly what you've exemplified here, great entrepreneurs think differently. They bring new ideas, new ways of doing things. Right. And I think for the city, it's very hard to swallow that. No, this isn't how we do things here. We do it like this. This is going to work. But then you kind of say, well, look around your urban core.
Yeah.
The way you've done things has led to this result. So why not? Let's try a different way that will get us to where we actually want to go. So I think the biggest challenge with development versus other businesses, I think, is there's a confluence or a combination of politics and business. Whereas a lot of other businesses, you get to just battle it out with other businesses. Development is kind of that rare breed where you're battling with businesses and in the political arena.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I find too is just based on statistics, LaSalle right now is the busiest municipality for development.
They're killing it.
But they're taking a lot of the top developers, like the Timberlands and the Rosatis and the Valentes of the world that are in the city building things. A lot of them are going to LaSalle.
Yeah.
Right. You don't necessarily see them coming to Windsor. You don't see a number of developers coming to Windsor.
Well, I've heard, Windsor's all I know because I've never built in another community. I just assume it's hard to build in any city. But what I've heard from a lot of bigger developers, they won't build in Windsor for those specific reasons, going through the planning process. And we had a story of a developer that wanted to do some stuff downtown from Toronto and started dealing with the city and pulled out entirely and said, sell the land. I don't want to deal with the city of Windsor. That's not good.
Yeah.
Preferably you don't have that, right? So I don't know. Hopefully there will be some improvement or we'll just force it through. It is what it is.
Yeah.
You got to get it done one way or another, right?
Yeah. Well, we need more individuals like yourself that will buy into this downtown core
right? I think people will because it takes one person to break the ice.
Yeah.
Once they've seen that it can be broken, other people will follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Marko, this has been awesome. It's really been enjoyable to hear your perspective on life and on business, and I hope we have more conversations like this.
Absolutely, man. And I'm proud of you as well for what you've been doing too. So it's incredible to see.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.